I know. It probably sounds crazy to say that a love story started at a funeral. But that's exactly where it happened, right in the middle of saying goodbye to my great-grandmother. My heart did something I still can't explain. Her name was Eleanor McKinley. But to us, she was just Grandma Ellie. 100 years old. A living legend. She outlived 3 husbands, 2 wars, and, no joke, a fire on a yacht in the Caribbean. My dad always said she was more immortal than all of us combined. I believed him to so of course. Her funeral wasn't just any funeral. It was grand. Like something out of a movie. We were at Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. White tents, French catering, orchids flown in from who knows where. People in expensive suits, air kisses, whispered gossip, and champagne in crystal flutes. A glamorous goodbye for a woman who never did anything small, and there I was, heels sinking into the grass, dressed too tight, heart a total mess. Not because I was the perfect great-granddaughter. I wasn't. I was the odd one out. The artsy one. The girl who dropped out of Harvard to make hand-poured candles that don't smell like rich people, as I like to say. The rebel. The disappointment. At least to most of my family. But not to her. Grandma Ellie said I had fire hidden behind my smile. She saw me. The real me. And losing her felt like losing the only person who truly did so. Yeah, I was out of it. Not crying. Not talking. Just existing. And then I saw him across the cemetery. Near the older tombstones. Holding a shovel in one hand. And carrying the bluest eyes I had ever seen. He wasn't dressed up. Dark jeans, black shirt, messy hair, strong hands. He looked real, like someone who builds, digs, carries things that matter, and for some reason, he looked right at me. That second was nothing and everything at the same time. Like time paused. Like the air around us held its breath. People were crying. The priest was speaking. But all I could see was him. I didn't know his name. I didn't know anything about him. But something pulled at me. Deep and sudden. That it wasn't just attraction. It wasn't just timing. It felt like a beginning. Or maybe an ending. All I know is that at the very same moment my great-grandmother left this world, my heart seemed to bury itself right there, with him. Hey, my loves, if you're going through something right now, a love that's impossible, a connection you can't explain, something that feels too intense to ignore, make sure you follow this channel, okay? Because I have so many stories of the heart to share, and I want to live every single one of them with you. Hit the bell. Stay with me till the end. This story is going to mess with your heart, in the best way. So, there I was, 2 feet from my great-grandmother's casket and completely distracted by the man who'd be helping bury her. I couldn't stop thinking about him. Those eyes. That calm. That stillness in his presence, like he wasn't afraid of anything, not even death. I didn't even know his name. But something about him made everything else disappear. I walked around the cemetery after the service, pretending I was just taking it all in. But I was really just looking for him, and yes, I found him. He was loading tools into the back of an old pickup truck. No music. No rush. Just him, with that same quiet focus. My heart. Full-blown drumline. And for reasons I still don't fully understand, I walked right up to him. Hey. Is it weird if I say thank you? I said. He looked up, surprised but not thrown off. For the service? Yeah, I mean, I guess. You made it feel respectful, I mumbled. Why was I suddenly 12 again? He smiled, slow and kind. It was a beautiful ceremony. She must have been important to you. She was. We stood there. In silence. But it didn't feel awkward. It felt like a pause in a conversation we hadn't started yet. He nodded. Toward the truck. I'm here most weekends. Work out of town during the week. Something about that made me want to know more. Not in a polite way. In a deep way. Like, tell me who you are, please. Then, out of nowhere, he reached into his back pocket, pulled out his phone, looked at me, not too serious, not too casual. Do you want to keep talking? Like, not here. Just, sometime. I blinked. You're asking for my number? I said, half laughing. Unless that's too weird. Weird? It should have been. But nothing about him felt wrong, so I gave it to him, just like that. He texted me that same night. I was still in bed, still in that emotional haze after the funeral, still wearing the same black dress, hair undone, makeup smudged, and then my phone lit up. Unknown number. Hey. It's the guy with the shovel. Just making sure you got home okay. I stared at the screen. Smiled without meaning to. And then, before I could overthink it, I replied, "Me, I did. Thanks for checking. And for not being weird about me walking up to you out of nowhere." Him. You didn't feel weird. You felt different. Different. That word hit me harder than I expected. We started texting. Nothing crazy at first. Just little things, where we were from, favorite movies, how we both liked walking in cemeteries. When it rains, yes, both of us. He told me he worked in a small town upstate during the week, Monticello, and came down to Brooklyn on weekends to help his uncle, who owned a funeral service. He'd been doing it since he was 17. I told him about my candle studio. He asked if any of them smelled like ghosts. I said, only the sexy ones. He didn't even flinch. Just sent a smiling emoji and asked what music I listened to when I poured wax. The more we talked, the deeper it got. He wasn't like other guys I'd met, the loud, performative, always on kind. He had this quiet soul. Thoughtful. Present. His texts weren't dry or forced. They read like small poems someone left folded in your coat pocket, and I started to crave them. Sometimes he'd disappear for hours, work, I assumed, and when he came back, he'd say something like, sorry. Had to help a family say goodbye today. Hope your candle smells like peace. Who says things like that? At night, I'd find myself rereading old messages, trying to imagine what his voice sounded like when he said them. Wondering if his hands were as gentle as they looked. There was this one night, around 1 a.m, where he sent, "Do you think we meet certain people to remember how to feel?" I didn't know what to say. Because I did feel something. Something warm, scary, electric, quiet, something I couldn't name yet. But I knew I wanted more of it. Hook for next block, we decided to meet. Just once. Just to see. In a park, in the middle of the city. I thought I'd kiss him. But he kissed me with his eyes, and held back with his mouth. And that restraint was the most intimate thing I'd ever felt. We picked a park in the city. Not too crowded, not too obvious. Fort Tryon Park, up in Upper Manhattan, quiet, full of trees and winding paths. The kind of place where people go to be alone, together. It wasn't a date. It was just a walk. But I dressed like it was more than that. Black boots. Soft sweater. My hair half up, like I didn't try too hard, even though I totally did. And in my coat pocket, a tiny candle I made the night before. Lavender and clove. Peace and heat. Like him, I got there first. My heart wouldn't sit still, and then I saw him. Walking toward me like he belonged there, in every season. Same dark jeans. Same quiet calm. Same eyes, God, those eyes. And for a second, I forgot how to breathe. He smiled, not wide, just enough to say, I'm happy you came. And then we walked. It was awkward at first, in that sweet way, where neither of us knew how to start being real in person. He asked if I always lit candles at funerals. I laughed and said, only when the dead had good taste. He told me about this little bookstore he loved back in Monticello, where he'd sit for hours and read poetry between shifts at the cemetery. I told him that made him sound like a mysterious romantic. He just said, that's the nicest lie anyone's ever told me. We sat on a bench overlooking the Hudson. Wind in our hair, barely touching. And when our hands brushed, just once. It felt like lightning disguised as skin. I looked at him. He looked at me. And the world narrowed down to just that bench. Just those eyes. I leaned in, just enough for him to know what I wanted, and he didn't move, not forward. Not away yet, he just held my gaze. Like he was memorizing it. Like he wanted the moment to stretch a little longer before it broke hand. Somehow, that non-kiss said more than any kiss could, because his eyes? They undressed me. Slowly. Carefully. Reverently. And his silence said, not yet. But soon. We walked back without touching. But everything about us had already changed. Hook. For next block, I told my friend about him. Just one. Her face. A mix of disbelief and judgment. Wait, you're falling for a gravedigger? And for the first time, I felt something I didn't expect. Shame, asterisk, I did something I wasn't planning to do. I told someone, not my parents. God, no. Just Maya. My best friend since freshman year. The only one who knew the real version of me beneath all the McKinley expectations. We were at a wine bar in Williamsburg. Girls' night. Laughter, heels, half-finished cocktails. I should have kept it light. I should have talked about anything else, but he was all I could think about, and so I told her. About the funeral. The texts. The park. The way he didn't kiss me, and how that somehow meant even more. She listened at first. Quiet, tilting her glass, playing with her straw, and then she asked it, that one word I was afraid would come. Wait, he's a what? I paused. Felt the air in my lungs freeze a little. He's a gravedigger, I said softly. Technically. A groundskeeper. He works at a cemetery upstate. Maya blinked. And then she laughed. Not kindly. Not cruelly either. Just confused. Like I'd told her I had a crush on a scarecrow. Are you serious right now? I nodded, like, actually. Serious? You're into a guy who buries people? Her words landed like cold stones. I tried to explain. That he was kind. That he was deep in ways most guys weren't. That he made silence feel sacred. That he remembered what I said, word for word, but she wasn't listening anymore. She just sipped her drink and said, so what, is this your rebellion arc? Falling for a guy with dirt under his nails? I felt my throat tighten. I wasn't ready for the shame that came. Not just from her judgment, but from how quickly I let it get to me. Suddenly, I heard the voice in my head echoing hers. You're falling for a covero. A man who digs graves. What would your family say? What would society think? And just like that, I started pulling back, not from him. Not yet. But from the truth of what I was feeling. I stopped checking my phone every 2 seconds. Waited hours before replying. Tried to sound more casual, less invested, but he noticed. Of course he did. Something feels different, he texted one night. Did I do something? And my fingers hovered over the screen and oh, I wanted to say. You're perfect. I'm just afraid. Of people. Of judgment. Of what it means to love someone the world doesn't applaud, but instead, I typed it's nothing. Just busy. Lies never taste good. But that one felt like betrayal on the tongue. Asterisk, a week later, he texted me something unexpected. If you're still curious, I'd like to show you my world. No pressure. Just, whenever you're ready. My heart stopped for a second. And then raced. I stared at the message for a full 10 minutes. Because I knew what his world meant. Not just his town. Not just his routine. It meant cemeteries. It meant graves. It meant the place everyone avoids unless they're forced to face loss, and yet. I said yes, I don't know why. Maybe because I owed it to him. Maybe because I was tired of pretending that this thing between us was small. Or maybe I just wanted to know the parts of him that no one else bothered to see. I took the train up to Monticello on a Saturday morning. Quiet ride. Leaves changing. Outside the window. My thoughts louder than I wanted them to be. He met me at the station. No dramatic gestures. No flowers or signs. Just him. In a dark green flannel. Looking at me like he was glad I came. Like he wasn't sure I actually would. He drove us to the cemetery where he worked. Rock Ridge Memorial. It was beautiful in a way I didn't expect. Rolling hills. Old stones. Trees that looked like they'd been there forever. There were no ghosts. No heaviness. Just peace. And wildflowers. He gave me a tour, not like a guide, but like someone introducing me to something sacred. This one, he said, kneeling beside a small white stone, was a teacher. She used to sneak cookies into her second graders' backpacks. He remembered names. Stories. Who they were, not just when they died. He showed me the tools he used. The gloves he wore. The shed where he kept spare roses in buckets of cold water, and for the first time, I understood. He didn't dig graves. He held space for grief. He created endings that felt less lonely. We walked in silence for a while. Birds chirping. Leaves crunching beneath our shoes. And then he said something I'll never forget. People think this job is dark. But to me, it's the opposite. It's where the noise stops. Where what's real finally shows. I looked at him. And something inside me cracked open. I saw him, fully, clearly. Not as the Covero, not as the guy with the shovel, but as someone who understood tenderness in a way that most people couldn't. We sat on a bench near the edge of the cemetery. He pulled out a thermos of coffee, handed me a cup, and asked what I was thinking. I didn't lie this time. I think you see more life here than most people see out there, I said. He smiled. Not like I impressed him, more like I met him, soul to soul, and in that moment, I wasn't afraid anymore. I almost said his name out loud. It was Sunday brunch, the usual kind, white linen napkins, over-buttered toast, a glass of something sparkling even though no one felt like celebrating. My parents were talking about real estate. My sister was planning her engagement party like it was a royal wedding. And in the middle of it all, I just sat there thinking about him, about the way his voice got softer when he talked about the people he buried. About the calluses on his hands. The way he listened when I spoke, like every word mattered. About the cup of coffee we shared on that bench, and the way the wind wrapped around us like a secret, and I wanted to say it. I met someone. That's all I had to say. Simple. Honest. True, but the moment came, and I didn't take it. I looked at my mother's pearls. My father's watch. The legacy in their eyes. And I thought about how their faces would change when I told them that the man I couldn't stop thinking about was a gravedigger. So I swallowed the words. Tucked them under my tongue. Smiled politely and asked for more coffee. Later that night, he texted me, "Did you tell them?" I stared at the message, felt the guilt crawl over me like cold water. Not yet, I typed back. I wanted to. I really did. He didn't reply right away. But when he did, it was soft. Simple, it's okay. I get it. But I felt it, the shift, like something invisible had been stretched too thin. We still talked. Still texted. Still shared thoughts about music and books and the way October sunsets always feel like endings, but it wasn't the same. He didn't ask when he'd see me again. And I didn't offer a not because I didn't want to. But because I was scared, not of him. Of them. Of the whispers. The sideways glances. The questions I didn't know how to answer. Why him? What does he do? Aren't you afraid of wasting your life? I told myself I was protecting us. Giving it time. Waiting for the right moment, but truthfully, I was hiding him. And he knew it. One night, we were on a call, quiet, tired, both of us holding on but pretending not to. I said, "I'm just scared of how they'll react." He paused, and then he said something that cracked me in two. So was I. But I chose you anyway. There was no anger in his voice. Just sadness. And clarity, and for the first time, I realized, loving someone in secret doesn't protect the love. It slowly suffocates it. I tried. God, I really tried. To forget. To move on. To be smart. That's what everyone said, in different ways. You're young. You'll find someone who fits your life. Don't confuse intensity with love. It's just a phase. So I said yes, when Daniel invited me to his rooftop party. Daniel. Son of an art dealer, face like a magazine cover, resume curated since birth. The kind of guy my parents would approve of before he even opened his mouth. The rooftop was beautiful. Fairy lights strung across steel beams. A skyline view that made everyone feel cinematic. Glasses clinking, music playing, people in outfits that screamed curated effort. I wore red. I smiled. I posed. I said all the right things, and I felt absolutely nothing. Daniel talked about investment portfolios and a gallery opening in Chelsea. I nodded. I laughed in the right places. I even let him touch the small of my back when we took a photo together, but I couldn't stop thinking about his hands, the way they looked when they were holding a shovel. The way they looked when they weren't, gentle, open, real. How they smelled faintly of soil and pine, like the earth trusted him. I excused myself halfway through the party. Said I had a headache. But the truth was louder than any music playing on that roof. I missed him. Not just his presence, but what he awakened in me. With him, I never had to pretend. I didn't have to be the version of myself my family wanted. Didn't have to measure my worth by legacy, title, or last name. With him, I could be soft. Curious. Messy. Alive. And without him, even the most glittering room felt hollow. That night, I sat in my apartment alone. Turned off all the lights. Lit one of my candles, the one I'd made thinking of him, lavender. Clove. A whisper of cedar, and I let myself remember everything. The bench in the cemetery. The way his voice lowered when he said my name. That almost kiss, how it had burned more than any kiss I'd ever actually had, and I cried. Not because I lost him, but because I was losing myself by pretending he didn't matter. The world around me was gold-plated. But gold doesn't make you feel seen. He did, and maybe that was the scariest part. He saw me. Not the McKinley girl. Not the rebel brand. Just me, soft, stubborn, terrified. And starting to believe in something real. I didn't plan it. There was no big declaration, no perfectly timed text, no what-if conversation with a friend. I just woke up one morning and realized I couldn't keep living a life that looked right but felt wrong. So I packed a bag, threw on a coat, and took the train back to Monticello. I didn't tell anyone. No goodbyes. No updates. No carefully worded lies, just silence, and one decision. My hands were shaking the whole ride. I kept imagining 1,000 versions of how he might react. Would he open the door? Would he be cold? Hurt? Would I be too late? But when he opened it, he just looked at me like he'd been expecting me the whole time, not in a smug way. In that way only someone who loves you knows, quiet relief, like a breath they've been holding finally released. He didn't ask why I came. He didn't need to. I stepped inside. His place was small, warm, filled with soft shadows and the smell of something earthy, coffee and cedar wood. A candle, maybe mine, was flickering on a side table. We didn't speak for a few minutes. Just stood there, looking at each other. Like everything we didn't say was already filling the room. I'm sorry, I whispered. For hiding you. For hiding us. He shook his head. You don't owe me that. You owe it to yourself. I walked closer. And when our hands touched, the world stilled. There was no grand gesture. No movie scene soundtrack, just fingers grazing, hearts thudding, and two people finally surrendering. He kissed me slowly. Carefully. Like he was asking permission with every breath. And I said yes, not with words, but with my body leaning in, with the way I held the back of his neck, with the way I melted into him like I'd been holding back for centuries that night. I stayed. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't talk about what came next. We just existed, side by side, finally free from fear. I curled into him in bed, skin against skin, breath against breath. And for the first time in months, I felt still and not empty. Not restless. Just held. I watched him fall asleep. His chest rising and falling in a rhythm that felt like home. And I thought about all the places I'd been. All the rooms I'd stood in, filled with chandeliers and polished silver and people with perfect smiles. None of them made me feel what this quiet moment did. None of them made me feel safe. He didn't promise me forever. He didn't need to, because in that night, I felt something deeper than time. A choice. A vow. A beginning. I didn't know how the world would react. I didn't care, because for the first time, I chose love and I chose him. I thought she'd understand. After everything, the texts, the silence, the tears I couldn't explain, I thought if anyone could see what this meant to me, it'd be Maya. We'd been best friends since college. She knew every version of me. The loud one, the broken one, the girl who'd cry in parking lots and laugh 2 minutes later. She'd held my secrets like they were sacred. She was supposed to be my safe place, so I called her. And for the first time, I didn't hide anything. I told her everything: how I'd taken the train up to Monticello, how I'd stood at his door with my whole heart in my hands, how I'd stayed the night and woke up feeling like myself for the first time in months. There was silence on the other end, then a soft, sharp laugh. "You're serious?" she asked. "Yes." "You slept with him?" I could already hear it in her voice, that shift from curiosity to judgment. "From friend to stranger, he's not just some guy with a shovel, Maya," I said, trying to hold my ground. He's real. He listens. He makes me feel like I can breathe." She cut me off. "Yeah, well, maybe that's because he literally works in a cemetery. Not much else to do but listen to ghosts." That one hurt more than I expected. I stayed quiet. She kept going. "I just don't get it," she said. "You have everything. You come from legacy, from wealth, from possibility. And this is who you give your heart to?" I blinked, stunned. Not because she disagreed, I was ready for that, but because she said, "Give your heart to," like it was something disposable, like I hadn't spent nights wondering if I was crazy for loving someone the world refused to label as worthy. "He's good, Maya," I whispered. "Better than most of the men we've known combined." She laughed again. And then said the one thing I'll never forget: "You're becoming one of them. The girls who throw their lives away for a man with rough hands and a tragic backstory." And just like that, I felt something close inside me. I don't know if it was grief or clarity, it may be both. "I thought you knew me," I said quietly. "I thought you wanted me to be happy." "I do," she replied. "But not like this." We didn't fight. We didn't scream. That we just stopped talking. That no dramatic goodbye. No closure. Just a sudden silence where years of trust used to be, and it hurt. Because love isn't just about choosing someone. It's about losing others who can't understand why you did. For days, I walked around with that ache inside me. Not just for her, but for the version of me that once believed people would always stay when you showed them your heart. Turns out, not everyone wants to see it, especially when it beats for someone they'll never try to understand. He didn't hear it from me, and of course not. That would have been too simple. Too honest. And oh, my father, Charles McKinley, heir to 3 generations of quiet power and loud expectations, found out through a family friend. Someone who'd just happened to be upstate for the weekend, saw me leaving a modest little house outside Monticello. And saw him the next morning. I woke up to 8 missed calls and 1 sharp text. Lunch. Noon. Private room at the Whitmore. Don't be late. I knew what was coming. But still, I hoped, maybe he just wanted to understand. Maybe, just maybe. There was a version of my father who remembered what it felt like to love someone unacceptable. There wasn't that he was already seated when I arrived. Dark suit. No tie. Cufflinks engraved with the family crest. I sat. He didn't say hello. I trusted you, he said flatly. No one else would have been given the freedom you've had. And this is what you do with it? I said nothing. He continued, sleeping with some cemetery worker? Is that what you think this family stands for? I flinched. Not at his words, but at how small they felt. How shallow. This isn't about the family, I said. It's about me. My life. He laughed, cold and low. You think you have a life outside this name? And there it was. The quiet truth that had always lived beneath our silver spoons and charity galas. I wasn't a person. I was a brand. You don't even know him, I said, and I don't need to. I know where he comes from. I know where he works. And I know what it looks like for my daughter to throw herself into the dirt for a man with no future. My hands trembled under the table. He's more decent than half the men you've tried to marry me off to. My father's jaw clenched. His voice dropped. If you stay with him, you're no longer one of us. No trust fund. No properties. No seat at the table. You walk away from everything. It was meant to terrify me. And for a second, it did, not because I needed the money. But because part of me still hoped I could belong to both worlds, but deep down, I knew. One of them was real. The other was just expensive scaffolding built around silence and shame. So I looked at him. The man who raised me. The man who taught me how to stand straight, but never how to feel, and I said quietly, then I guess you never really saw me. He didn't reply. He just stood. Pulled a card from his wallet. Slid it across the table. I'll give you a week, he said. 1 week to come to your senses. And then he left. The waiter came to ask if I'd like to order. I just shook my head, because my appetite wasn't gone. It had been replaced by grief, not for the love I might lose, but for the family I already had. I told myself I could handle it. I repeated that sentence over and over like a prayer. You're strong enough. This is just noise. You chose him. You can survive this. But the truth? The noise became thunder. And thunder, when it's close enough, shakes everything you thought was steady. My father's words lived in my chest like stones. Every text from him, the man I loved, felt heavier than the last. Not because he did anything wrong, but because the weight of everyone else's expectations was pressing against my ribs, hard and unrelenting. I started answering slower. I visited less. I stopped asking about his days, not because I didn't care, but because caring hurt. Because every moment that made me feel more like myself reminded me how much I stood to lose. He noticed. Of course he did. He never begged. Never guilted me. But I could feel the silence building in his messages. One night, I went up to see him. It had been almost 2 weeks that he met me outside, same as always, but this time, he didn't smile. Not really. Yet we walked down the hill behind the cemetery, where the land sloped into woods. It was quiet, golden hour, birds in the distance. I miss you, he said softly. I didn't reply right away. Yet he looked at me, eyes steady. Do you still want this? Yes, I said. Too fast. Too thin. But he heard the hesitation. Then why are you disappearing? Tears burned behind my eyes, because I don't know how to carry it all, I whispered. The judgment, the pressure, my family. I'm not asking you to carry all of it, he said. I'm asking you to carry us. With me. He reached for my hand, and I hesitated. That second, just that small, fragile pause, it broke something between us. He let his hand fall, and then he said the thing I'll never forget, don't fight for this if you're not going to fight with me. I broke. I'm scared, I said, finally. Of losing everything. He nodded. I already did, he said quietly. I lost you. And you're still standing right in front of me. I wanted to run to him. To fall into his arms and scream that I didn't mean it. That I did love him. That I was just lost, but I didn't, and he didn't wait. He turned, walked back up the hill, and didn't look back. That night, I lay in bed with my phone pressed to my chest and no messages. No calls. Just silence, thick, endless, and full of what-ifs. I'd chosen comfort, approval, safety, and I'd lost my peace. Time passed, weeks bled into months. The kind of time that doesn't move in straight lines, it loops, circles, echoes. I filled my days with noise. Events. Emails. Dinners with people who asked questions they didn't really want the answers to. I told myself I was fine. I even believed it sometimes, but there was this hollow space inside me, a quiet ache where his voice used to live. I'd walk by a florist and think of the roses he kept in buckets near the shed. I'd light one of my own candles and feel that ghost of a memory, his breath on my neck, the way he said my name like it belonged only to him. I kept my distance. But I never really left him. Then, one afternoon, I got a call. It was my aunt. Soft voice. Shaky breath. Sweetheart, it's your Uncle David. My stomach dropped. He was the only one in the family who ever looked at me like I was enough exactly as I was. No expectations. No judgment. Just quiet support. The funeral would be in Monticello. Of course it would. I almost didn't go. I told myself it would be too much. Too messy, but something deeper than logic pulled me there. I wore black. Simple, quiet. Not designer. I sat in the back. I didn't speak, and then I saw him at the edge of the field, near the trees. Standing in the same dark shirt. Holding the same familiar tools. Older, somehow, not in years, but in weight. He didn't see me at first. But I couldn't stop looking at him. I watched as he gently touched the side of the casket. As he helped lower it into the ground with a reverence most people reserve for weddings, not endings, and I remembered, all at once, why I loved him, not just because of how he made me feel, but because of who he chose to be in a world that didn't make space for softness in men like him. After the service, people scattered. I stayed back. He turned and saw me. We froze. Wind brushed between us. Leaves whispered secrets neither of us knew how to say. I took a step forward. I'm not here to bury anything, I said, voice trembling. I came to bring something back. He didn't move, but his eyes, they lit up like embers that never really went out. I kept walking. I was scared, I said. Of what people would think. Of disappointing everyone. But I've lived without you. And it's empty. Even when it looks full. He looked at me for a long time. And then said, gently, I still dream about your candles. I laughed. Tears in my eyes. I still dream about your hands. Silence again, but this time, it didn't hurt. It healed. He took a step toward me. You came back. I never really left, I said, and in that field, surrounded by loss and soil and everything we once ran from, we stood face to face. Not as strangers. Not as halves, but as people who'd survived the storm and found their way home. I told everyone. No more secrets. No more half-truths whispered between dinner courses. I didn't wait for another family event, or a phone call, or someone else to find out. I told them, all of them. My mother. My sister. My aunts with their pearl necklaces and pitying glances. And yes, my father. I told them I was back. In Monticello. That I had seen him again. That I was with him, not seeing him. Not figuring things out. With him, and I said it the way truth should be said, clearly. With my chin up. My mother cried. My sister looked like I just confessed to burning the family crest, but my father, he was calm. Too calm. He invited me to his office. Polished wood. Leather chairs. A glass of bourbon waiting by the window, untouched. You're still choosing this, he said, voice like glass. After everything. Yes. No trust. No inheritance. No protection. I smiled. I don't need protecting. I needed understanding. And you never gave me that. He leaned back. Studied me. Like I was a stranger sitting in his daughter's body. Then you know what comes next. I do, I said, and I stood. Without begging. Without tears. Just with the quiet strength of someone who has finally stopped trying to fit a mold that was never made for her. I left his office with nothing in my hands, but everything in my heart. We got married 2 weeks later at the same cemetery where we met. People said it was strange. A wedding surrounded by gravestones, but to us, it was sacred. A place where things ended, yes, but also where we began. The flowers were simple. Wild, like him. My dress wasn't from a designer. It was soft, handmade, wrapped around me like something earned. He waited for me beneath the oak tree at the edge of the field. Same eyes. Same hands. The man who never asked me to change, only to choose. When I walked toward him, I wasn't thinking about who wasn't there. I was thinking about every moment that led me to him. The silence. The grief. The almosts. The yes that bloomed after. Every note that we wrote our own vows. His were quiet. Full of earth and time and everything that never needed to be loud to be true. Mine. I met you when I was losing someone I loved. But I didn't know you'd help me find myself. And I choose you, not just when it's easy, not just when it's poetic. But always. Especially when the world says not to. When we kissed. The wind picked up, soft, like a whisper from the past, giving us its blessing that we didn't throw rice. We planted seeds around the oak, because we weren't just celebrating what we found. We were growing something, together, and there, in the place where endings are marked with stone. We wrote our beginning, *, we stayed, not just in love, but in truth. We didn't move back to the city. Didn't chase the noise. Didn't try to make our life look like anyone else's. We built something quieter. More rooted. We opened a little flower shop at the edge of the cemetery. It was his idea. People come here to mourn, he said. Let's give them something to carry out. We called it Everlife. Simple, a little poetic, slightly ironic, just like him. He handled the garden. I did the arrangements. Roses, lilies, wild daisies, sometimes candles, when I had the time. People would walk in thinking about endings, and leave holding color. It became a place where grief and beauty could sit side by side. Where silence didn't feel lonely, just full of memory. Some days, I'd catch him at the back counter, dirt on his hands, a book open beside him. Still reading poetry between tasks. Still calm. Still real, and I'd look at him and think, this is what love is. Not grand. Not loud. But daily. Earned. Alive. My family never really came around. My father stayed quiet. But I think he watched. From a distance, and maybe that's enough, because I didn't build this life for their approval. I built it for me. For us. For peace, and peace is exactly what I found. We still visit the oak tree sometimes, where we said our vows. He lays down new flowers. I trace the initials we carved into the bench that day. Time keeps moving. So do we, but this love? It's steady. It's safe. It's sacred, and every time I see him smile at a stranger walking out of our shop with a bouquet in their hands, I fall in love all over again. They say it's strange to love a gravedigger, but strange, I've learned, is just another word for rare, and rare is everything. *, what about you? Would you love someone the world might judge, if that person made you feel seen? Safe? Whole? Would you let go of everything you were told to want, to hold on to something real? Or maybe the real question is, do you believe that when it's true love, it always finds a way, or do you think the universe only helps those brave enough to risk everything for it? Because I did, and I'd do it again.